One of the draws of living in Salida, Colorado in the Arkansas River Valley is the raw natural beauty and high quality of life. We're surrounded by beautiful mountains, open spaces, working lands, wildlife, abundant recreation, and the Arkansas River running through here. But as more people are drawn to this gorgeous area, the importance of smart growth by protecting our lands, waters, and quality of life is paramount. With me today is one of the people helping protect Salida and surrounding areas, Suzanne Copping. Suzanne is the program director at the Central Colorado Conservancy based in Salida. The Conservancy protects and restores the lands, waters, and quality of life in Chaffee, Lake, Park, and Fremont counties as our communities face pressure and rapid growth. Suzanne has worked with partners to implement regional land and water conservation initiatives since the early 2000s in varied positions as a project manager, program coordinator, field and district manager, and advisor with both the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management. As program director, Suzanne works with landowners on conservation easements that support continued agricultural production in our valley, as well as protect wildlife habitat and scenic mountain views. She also partners with ag producers, agencies, and other nonprofits to implement conservation and restoration practices that improve ecosystem and resilience. Suzanne brings her extensive expertise, appreciation for place, and love of the outdoors to her role with the Conservancy. Thanks for being here, Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Monica.
Well, yes, so we are gonna start like I do with all of my guests and talk about your origin story. I wanna know more about you first before we start talking about the Conservancy. And I do wanna disclose, Suzanne is one of my friends. I get to chat with her about all sorts of stuff. We like to enjoy the beautiful outdoors in this area. We go on lots of hikes together.
We have some favorite hikes.
And paddleboarding and all that good stuff. So I do know your love of outdoors. I share that with you. But tell all of our guests how you arrived in Salida. When was that and what brought you here?
Oh, interesting. I love that question. So I arrived here in November of 2017.
Okay.
I had actually never heard of Salida prior to finding out it existed and moving here. I was offered a job with the Bureau of Land Management. I had been working with the National Park Service, and I accepted a position that was somewhere near Denver. So we flew out here, my husband and I, and started looking for houses in Salida, and that's when we learned it was 3 hours from Denver. And it was an incredibly beautiful place, and maybe a place that we could absolutely put roots down in and spend the rest of our lives in.
Okay. So, because before that, where were you?
I was in Annapolis, Maryland, and I grew up on the East Coast, and I spent about 20 years in the Mid-Atlantic. Chesapeake Bay watershed. So I worked a lot on watershed restoration projects and initiatives while I was there.
Okay. And then you were kind of wanting to get out of the area, and you were just, you were drawn to Colorado in general, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think my heart has always been in the mountains, and back east I grew up hiking in New England, and of course in the Mid-Atlantic in the Shenandoahs and the Blue Mountains. So once we arrived here, it was really like my heart had called me here.
Nice. And so you knew you wanted to come to Colorado, but like, so you said you hadn't heard of Salida, but what, of all the places in Colorado, if the job was in the Denver area, that's not the obvious choice. So
I skipped the Denver layover.
Okay. You're like, nope, straight to the mountains.
Yeah. And we feel so lucky. Yeah. I know we have friends who really aspired to come and move to Salida and live in Salida for years or decades before they arrived here, and we just it was the path was laid out for us. So very special to live here and work here as well.
Totally. Yeah, I know it was kind of, you've been in this area for a while and gotten to learn all about this whole Colorado area, but So I like to tell people one of the reasons, or let me rephrase that. I like to tell people that one of the ways I meet people when you first move to a place is to, like join an activity, do something that you love, and you'll often find people in that group. And I joined the Run Club when I first moved here, and you were one of my first friends.
I was.
Also at the Run Club. So like the trail running, and so
Absolutely.
Because that was one of the first groups you joined when you moved here?
Absolutely. I moved here in early November, and 3 weeks later, I ran the Turkey Trot. Which you may recall runs up the spiral drive.
Okay, yeah.
And I had been living at about zero elevation and ran a 2-miler at very high, 7,000 plus elevation. So it was a bit of an inauguration to the elevation here.
But I mean, it's not a super competitive race. I mean,
it was fun. We did not win a pie, my partner and I, but it was super fun.
That was a good way to meet people, and I know there was like,
Absolutely.
people hanging out afterwards and like, hey, let's go get breakfast here. And that's just kind of like how, you meet people when
one
you first...
one friend leads to another.
Totally. Yeah, there was a lot of that. So, and then tell a little bit about how you made it to the Central Colorado Conservancy and, your path there.
Yeah, for sure. So I moved here, of course, in 2017. As I said, I was a federal government employee working with the Bureau of Land Management. I had a wonderful 8 years, mostly as a manager, but managing programs as well as projects and people and budgets. I worked for a couple of years in Canyon City, and this was the whole time I was commuting from Salida. So I've had some adventures along the Route 50 corridor. I've also worked in Gunnison, worked there for about 6 months as a field manager. My favorite job with the BLM was as a field manager based in Montrose, Colorado. And that's where I got to know and work with a lot of agricultural producers on the western slope, primarily ranchers, but a lot of ranchers in Colorado and around the West will bring their cattle onto forest or Bureau of Land Management land in the summers or in the winters as well for grazing. And so that's when I started to learn a bit more about agriculture in Colorado and especially up and down the Arkansas Valley and the importance of working lands to our heritage in Colorado as well as to our current ways of life, the landscapes we look at, the food we buy at local markets. So that ranching heritage in Colorado is very rooted here and we are very interrelated with it, whether we realize it or not.
Well then, I like to jump around in my interviews because I was going to ask you that question later, but let's just talk about it a little bit now, like expand on why that's important for people who just see this land, like why is so much of this land taken for, cattle when you can build on it or insert other cause or other source. So like, why is that important to preserve that agricultural land?
Yeah, so I am by no means an expert.
That's okay.
So you will have to bring on other experts.
But from your perspective and working with it,
from my perspective, I think there's maybe a heart perspective and a mind perspective. And so I think I'll speak a little bit first to the heart perspective. Many of us are drawn to this area because of the views. And we can see some of those views of the mountains because of the open spaces. And a lot of those open spaces are grazed or hay is grown. And those pastures are hayed to feed cattle and sheep, or the hay is sold, to other producers. So we as residents in this area are very much interlinked with a culture and ways of working that have been going on here in the valley for 150 years or more. And so I think the heart part is that way of life. Even if we are not producers ourselves, we are very much tied to it. Our hearts are tied to it often when we speak about the beauty here. And that slower lifestyle. From a mind perspective, and this is maybe the more intellectual piece of it, and again, I am no expert.
But you know a lot more than I do. So
bring on some other experts. But really, what ranch lands provide us and what these open protected spaces provide us, and even a lot of these open spaces they're not grazed, they're not farmed. But what these open spaces provide us is they're like filters for our water system. The water that is coming down from Chavano and from our mountain ranges down into the upper Arkansas is filtered through these very clean landscapes and clean waterways. And these open spaces are filters for that. And so, we are beneficiaries as residents, in Salida, some of these, healthy lands and healthy waterways. And some of we call ecosystem values as kind of a fancy term, but basically healthy lands and waters that these open spaces contribute to. And if you want to substitute out a subdivided property that was ranch land into many smaller parcels of land, that's going to have a different impact on our land and water. And, it's a balance, right? It's like so many things. It's a balance of, enabling people to maintain a rural way of life that many generations have in this area, and also allowing that growth in a way that can help, that can also sustain us and sustain the reasons why we moved here.
Absolutely, because it behooves all of us to not only have that clean water and those views. I mean, that's why people come here. Yeah. And we are a tourist economy with people coming out here for the mountains, for the river, for skiing monarch, just enjoying this space. And so if it's overdeveloped and you no longer have clean water, you no longer have those views, you no longer have the open space, then you're kind of losing the whole point of coming here in the first place. So you have, like you said, a balance.
It's a balance. And
very much a balance.
Oh my gosh. And it's a precarious balance too, right? And it's always changing. I would add one more thing, and that's wildlife.
That's very important.
I have been fascinated fascinated really in, as I've interacted with landowners on some of these pretty large parcels, like along when you're driving between Salida and BB.
Okay.
Some of those, larger open areas where you'll see cattle grazing, in the summer you'll see elk.
Totally.
And you'll see mule deer and massive herds
yeah,
absolutely. And and those ungulate species, that wildlife is that's where they hang out in winter. Yeah, because it's a little warmer down here. And so these private, the privately owned lands are places where wildlife congregate. And so when we when we can seek to find that balance and maintain some of these open places for wildlife, we're supporting that whole very complex wildlife system as well. And we're enabling those species to be able to continue to coexist with us.
Yeah, and they are very important to our entire ecosystem.
Yes.
So we can all coexist.
And our economy and our recreation.
Yeah.
And again, I think they contribute to the beauty of why we live here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. You can always tell when somebody's new to Salida, even just in town, because they're like, oh my gosh, did you see that deer go across the street? And then there's other people who've lived here for a long time. They're like, yep, you wait for it to cross the street and then you just go on your way. It's fine.
Yeah, be very careful driving by the courthouse.
Yeah, they like to congregate out there. But so there's just a lot of wildlife here. And it adds to the character and beauty for sure. So that's a good segue. So we've talked a little bit about the why for the Conservancy. So talk a little bit more about what you guys do. And I know you just celebrated your 25th anniversary.
Yeah, 2026.
So, so that's huge. So tell us a little bit more about the Central Colorado Conservancy.
Yeah, so our mission is to protect and restore the lands, waters, and quality of life in Central Colorado. As we continue to experience, pressures, right? And there are development pressures, there are economic pressures. There's pressures on way of life here, and the Conservancy plays a role in convening partners to work on projects to sustain, the clean air that we have here, the clean water that we have here, as well as to work directly with landowners. And it's when we work with landowners, it's on a voluntary basis, and landowners will often come to us, or there'll be some word of mouth, and express a desire to retain some of the way of life and the ways that they have practiced working on their lands or living on their lands for sometimes many generations. And as an accredited land trust, the Conservancy is sort of nationally and under our federal system and our state system, it is allowed to essentially hold subdivision rights or restrictions on subdivision on behalf of these landowners, if they choose, as a way to protect the lands that they live on now into future generations. So essentially, one of the things that the Conservancy does, as a land trust, is we form these relationships with the landowners, and we work through a real estate transaction with them, and then we hold a permanent deed it's called a deed of conservation easement on their behalf. And in return, they receive some tax credits and some other benefits. It may be part of their succession planning that they intend to have a conservation easement on their property. It may be part of their estate planning. There are various motivations. And a lot of times too, back to heart and mind, it's very much in their heart to see the places that they have grown up and lived and worked and that their grandchildren are working on sustained, into the long term. And to the hearts and minds piece, I think that's one of the things that the Conservancy is the proudest of is, continuing that tradition, in partnership with landowners. We also, sort of in parallel with that landowner relationship that we have with folks, we work with other partners to do water restoration efforts, and many times those have multiple benefits. They benefit a landowner by helping them to improve how the water moves around on their land, or how their land filters that water into the Arkansas, but also sometimes we work on projects that help create recreational opportunities, along the Arkansas River. There's a project we're working on with Trout Unlimited and Garnet and others along the South Arkansas to do some watershed restoration work and making those lands more resilient. Again, that balance to some of the development, more resilient in the face of some of the newer development that's been happening
in that area.
So we're constant. It's a changing landscape, and the Conservancy is constantly, seeking to find that balance, between conservation and restoration. And also, we work with many types of organizations and individuals, to protect the places that we love.
Yeah, no, that does strike me as incredibly valuable, and just kind of like the overall impact of preserving the community, like we said, and just keeping it why we're here in the first place. And so we don't lose the value of this place. I think it sounds like it's just incredibly valuable work. So thank you for doing all of that. So I guess one of the questions I had for you was, ways people in the community, so say you're new here or you've been here and you're not quite sure, you can hear this and think that sounds really valuable. I didn't even know they were doing that. How can somebody help?
Yeah, for sure. We have a few ways to get involved. Certainly, one way that many people start getting involved, if you like to roll your sleeves up and maybe get a little dirty, is we have a program called Hands for Lands, which brings volunteers out on private lands, many times ranch lands. And we support ranchers with like big dirty projects like cleaning ditches prior to those ditches opening up to pick up the spring runoff. It was the scene was a little bit different this year with the drought. But we had 3 work trips this year and it was probably at least 50 volunteers out onto these 3 varied properties, and we helped the landowners to clean their ditches. And so that's going in, and it's with clippers and with shovels and with rakes and cleaning out the debris that's built up. That's incredibly valuable. One of the ranchers said that what the work that he used to do would take him a week. It would take just many, many, many days. That we brought in some volunteers and it took half a day. And it was just and the appreciation that ranchers have for that for that kind of support, and it's just it's the best 3 hours you ever spend going out there and raking out a ditch. So that's like the roll up your sleeves work. But if you're interested in other types of work, we have a stewardship gala once a year in September. It's at Mount Princeton. It's a super fun event, and there are ways to help behind the scenes, if you like behind the scenes work, with soliciting partnerships with businesses and seeking donations for the auction, as well as attending the gala itself, which is a super fun event. It's beautiful, really good food, and just great camaraderie and like-minded people. And then I would say the final thing is that the Conservancy as a 501c3 really relies on donations. It's probably one of the bigger sources it's the biggest source of our funding for the funds we need to pay staff to direct the work and get the work done. So we are, very grant funded, but we also need a little bit of money to provide the kind of general direction of the organization and to get the work done on the ground, to pay for the things that grants often don't cover. And so donations are a really powerful way to show your support of clean water and clean lands in Central Colorado, and to support the mission of continuing to sustain the Colorado that we love. So I would say that general support through donations is incredibly valuable to us.
The better ones. I think it is a really valuable, like I said, just valuable thing to do for our community. And so if somebody they have ranch land, and I would imagine there's pressure to sell that, or from family, or even directly from developers, or whatever it is, and you just, like you said, the heart, and you want to make sure that you do keep that. You've been working on it your whole life. You want it to pass down for generations to come. So how would what would a landowner in that situation do to connect with you, and what would that process look like?
Absolutely reach out. There's no commitment. I think the big, this is sort of speaking a little bit for myself, but it's a complicated process, and it can take a year and a half, 2 years. It can take or more sometimes.
To do the Conservancy, you mean?
To enter into a conservation easement.
Gotcha.
The full process, soup to nuts. It can take a long time. So I think, talking with me, talking with our executive director, Wendy McDermott, talking with other landowners and other ranchers who have it's called entering into a conservation easement, but have gone through that process, and talking with them, to understand what's involved. And also the easements themselves are to some extent tailored on the individual needs of a landowner. Those subdivision rights are restricted, and that's a pretty common feature of these easements. However, there's language around, building. Certainly, new buildings are allowed under some restrictions that are agreed to in advance. And so there's definitely some negotiations that end up going on over that period to find a place where the landowner is comfortable. Because the entire process, again, is voluntary for the landowner, and landowners, have every right, as private landowners, to continue to use, to work on their lands and to live on their lands and to carry out the livelihoods that they would like and that their future generations would like. So
absolutely.
So it's a careful process.
Yeah,
and
sounds
thoughtful.
like
it. I think it takes some time, but that also invites an opportunity for thoughtfulness.
Yeah, so it's not just they're signing up for this blanket situation and
Yeah.
It's completely rigid. It sounds like they have a say in how it would work. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's very driven by the landowner and their needs and their desires, what they need and want to get out of the process.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a conversation.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we can absolutely put people in touch with others that have gone through the experience. And there's some pretty passionate folks out there.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. And just some lovely, lovely individuals.
Yeah. So what is your take? Because I know you work with a bunch of different counties, but like in Chaffee County, where Salida and Buena Vista are, the interactions with people here as a whole, you know, from somebody just thinking of being in this area.
Oh, yeah.
Like what is your take on Chaffee County people?
Yeah. County people.
I didn't ask that as perfectly as I had wanted.
I don't know if this answers your question, but I would say I'm going to refer to Route 24 again. I'm going to refer because, of course, I live in Salida, and I end up driving, to BV and beyond, pretty regularly, and, or to Canyon City, and the Conservancy, works in Fremont County as well, and so has interest in or is working on some efforts, along the Route 50 corridor into Canyon City.
Yeah.
And, I would encourage you or your listeners to just envision sort of that drive, and that, many of the places that we take for granted, some of the views that we take for granted along that route, and some of the ways that land is maintained that is so beautiful to us, is the result of an incredible amount of dedication and love for the land of the ranchers who live along 24. Certainly a lot more ranch land along 24 than on 50.
Yeah.
But again, with some parcels along 50 that have been protected over time and, will be protected. And to think about, the individual contributions that those people make, not only to themselves and their families, but to all of us in this county.
Yeah.
And that's something that I have just almost instantly just really appreciated as I meet with more ranchers and producers, because I'm relatively new in this position, that now when I drive on a highway and I look to the left or look to the right, I know the person that lives there, I know their family, and I know, the heart, their heart and their mind. And I think that it just makes living in Central Colorado that much richer, because we do have this incredible, this deep-rooted love for land here.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's for all of us to help, to play our role to protect.
Yeah, I love that. Heart and mind. Some good parting words, because it is often taken for granted, I think. And then, I know I talk to a lot of people when they come, especially from Denver, and you're kind of coming into getting your first view of the valley, and it's this gorgeous view of the Collegiate Peaks and all of this open space, and you can just exhale and, I get to live here. And I mean, and that view is in large part because of all of the open space and the people who are doing that. So that's amazing. Well, thank you. Any parting words on what you want, anything we didn't cover on wanting to talk about the Conservancy or Salida as a whole?
I so appreciate the opportunity to talk with the Conservancy. And again, I would encourage anybody that is interested in learning more to visit our website, or my email is on the website. Give me a shout, and I'd be happy to talk. And and there's probably other ways to work with the Conservancy as well, either directly or indirectly through the work we do with partners. So
that's true. You guys partner with a lot of other organizations in town.
We do. Garna and Guidestone and a lot of the other organizations that you've interviewed.
Sure.
So get involved and there's a lot of work to get done, and it takes a village.
It does.
So,
and
so get involved.
What a lovely village we have. And then what is your website?
It is centralcoloradoconservancy.org.
Yep. So
very long, but very simple.
Yeah. centralcoloradoconservancy.org, and you can reach out to Suzanne or anybody with the Conservancy and donate and learn more. So thank you for the work you do.
Oh, thank you, Monica. I hope we get to go for a hike again soon.
I know. We got to enjoy these beautiful lands, because it's we live in such a beautiful place.
We do. So appreciate it. Thank you.